Welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing and That's Badass Wood Art. The Brian Flores press conference just wrapped up, guys. A lot of nuggets throughout the presser. We got some quotes rolling around on the bottom, but Tyler, we can start with you. What were some of your takeaways from the press conference?
I was really impressed with how deliberate of a communicator that Brian Flores was, talking about being a teacher. And that as a coach, that's the one thing that you really need to be. You need to be a teacher. You can be as brilliant as you want, but if you can't communicate it, it's not really going to make a difference. I remember my physics teacher in high school. That man could have been teaching like PhD level physics courses. I didn't learn a dang thing from him because he was honestly too smart for what he was doing. And I think that Flores has that mix of being a very intelligent thinker, being a very intelligent schemer, and also having a teacher mindset, especially with the conversation that he had. Hey, I talk to my wife all the time. She's a teacher, and she teaches me things on how to better communicate with these guys.
That was something Miles brought up.
I loved that a lot. Also, we knew the versatility piece. He's going to love versatile pieces. You see it across every defense he's ever had. And I think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to focus on as far as projecting out for the Vikings future even more.
Back to that teacher point, Miles, you made a tweet immediately during the press conference about that teacher thing. So that obviously stood out to you as well. Any other takeaways off of that?
Well, I mean, it hits home for me because my wife's a school social worker. She deals with IEPs. She deals with kids every day. I've worked with kids. I think it just goes back to, and being a former player, and like the best coaches that I ever had were the ones that treated players individually, and knowing when to treat players individually and how to develop players individually rather than just like you do it my way or the highway. And I think that's such an important way as a coach to get the most out of your players. Is not every player is the same. Not every player likes to be coached or does the best being, operating the same way. So treating them like individuals and giving them those, yes, there's ways as a coach that everybody, you have to there's a base level of everybody has to be treated the same way, but some players need to be treated a little bit more like hands-on. Some need a little bit more hands-off. Some need a little bit more, not hand-holding, but a little bit more of like a walk me through it, a little bit more opportunities
for sure
and learnings. And so it's really about taking that individuality into it as a coach, as a teacher, and getting the most out of your players that way. And I think hearing that from Flores, I think Zimmer was that type of coach too. Maybe a little bit more hard-headed in times, but Zimmer definitely got the most out of his players because he knew how to get the most out of them in that way. And I think from a teaching standpoint, and so I loved hearing that from Flores and just how the real world can really come into your profession. Like as a coach, him talking with his wife and how teaching in her day-to-day life impacts him as a coach and vice versa. And so I love that.
Ryan, what was your thought on just like Flores alluded to the fact that they had the guys here already to kind of run the defense he wants. Are you buying into that?
No.
Or do you think?
I mean, to a certain extent, right? I mean, we even talked about on our last show where Cam Dantzler, right? Like he's actually fit really well for this scheme, right? Because he's more of a man-to-man press kind of corner, right? So hopefully he can flourish under here. Andrew Booth, very similarly. So hopefully there's some pieces here, but I do think that there's going to be some roster turnover that we're going to need to do because of probably a little bit more specifically in the trenches, I would say, more so than in the outside. Granted, I still think we need talent on the outside to be able to be competitive. But so I think there's a lot of work to do. I think that's coach speak because he obviously doesn't want to just come in here and then if we do retain these guys and he says, well, we need a lot of work on the defense. They're probably not going to be too receptive of that. Going back quick to the to the teacher thing too. What that alludes to me is leadership, right? I mean, yeah, obviously you could be a coach, but to truly be a leader, you have to really understand who you're leading and how to get the best out of them. And that approach, that IEP approach, which I've never heard of that before. Miles, you said you did just because you're in that world, in that space. I've never heard of that philosophy, but as soon as I heard it, I did a quick Google search and learned a little bit, very surface level. But it's a good approach, right? That's the best way you're going to get the most out of the talent you have here in house.
And for anybody that doesn't know what it means, it's individual education plan. And so it's, again, individualizing people so that you create a plan for yourself. And as a coach, you can use that plan for that individual player so that like there are certain areas that they really need to work on to improve and to learn. And so that it's pretty like when you think of it from like a football perspective, it's pretty standard. That's pretty like.
I mean, but it's like a business philosophy in general too. Like 100%. Some of the best leaders that you see in corporate America kind of follow. Maybe it's not called IEP, but it's that kind of individualized process.
Brian Flores hit home again, and it's nothing new that we don't know about his defensive scheme, but just the fact that he wants versatility within his players. Tyler, are there guys on roster that kind of fit that mold for the Vikings?
Two that stand out to me are Lewis Cine and Harrison Smith. And you look at how Brian Flores likes to use safeties. He likes them to be able to do a lot. The two biggest examples are Patrick Chung and Javon Holland. Look at the things that Javon Holland was doing. He was going anywhere from playing deep safety to playing in the box to being one of the best blitzers on those Dolphins defenses, and he was using him in a variety of ways. I would expect Lewis Cine to be used like a missile this year and being asked to do a lot of different things. Harrison Smith probably going to play a lot in the box, play rover, and just be very creative. There's a front that they like to use with those 5-man fronts. It is ironically called Viking, where you put the safety over the center in a zero technique role. Obviously, he's standing up, but I think that's something Smith, he's done a lot of that before with Mike Zimmer, where he's at the line of scrimmage and then he bails back right before the snap. You can trust him to do those things, and he has that kind of intelligence and football IQ. I also think that the Vikings might prioritize safety. And Cam
Are you thinking Brian Branch?
Brian Branch, Antonio Johnson, the kid from Texas A&M. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the number one priority, but if you want guys who play more of a modern NFL style, who can play in the box, solid tacklers, can do multiple different things for you. I was watching Brian Branch's tape yesterday, and I fell in love with him, and I saw within 4 plays why Saban was too. We know the connection with the people in New England and Nick Saban. Obviously, Saban was Bill Belichick's defensive coordinator for the Browns in '94, and they have a very tight-knit relationship. Would not shock me if he ended up being the pick if he's available at 23. Even so, 3 safety sets are going to be used a lot just because of like what the NFL is changing into with needing speed at that second level. And I think it could be really successful if they got the right piece in there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Going back though to the press conference today, what were you guys' thoughts that like he essentially alluded that like turned down the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job to come here?
I don't know if he said that.
Well, it kind of seemed like it.
No, he turned down the waiting game that they were in, essentially, right? Like that doesn't mean he wasn't going to get it. I think it was him alluding to the fact that because obviously they wanted to still interview Gannon. Like I think that's it. Like whether they were going to hire Gannon or Flores, but like I think the Cardinals were waiting it out on the Super Bowl, and Flores being like, well, do I want to wait on that? Do I want to find my situation and go? And he felt this was a really good spot for him and his family. To your point, and that's not to say that he didn't have a shot at getting that job, but I think it was more of him alluding to the fact that, like, yes, I was in the mix, but I wanted to make a decision for myself now, and they weren't willing to make a decision now.
Well, and like, pick me or don't. Like, I'm either your guy or I'm not, right? And I'm not going to sit here and wait around. And while the Vikings are ready to make me an offer, right? One of the most intriguing things, in my opinion, that he said was actually the very like last line of that press conference when somebody quickly asked, 4-3 or 3-4, and his answer was, "Who are we playing that week?" Right, yep. And that's the exact approach. I think I alluded to this like probably 3 episodes ago, where I said, we're gonna have a coach that really schemes to the opponent and the opponent's best player, right, and assuming that he takes more of that Bill Belichick philosophy. You watch those New England defenses. Yeah, it's the only thing that's consistent is the inconsistency of their sets, right? They bring a lot of diversity and change to that based on who they're playing, which I love.
And I'll open this question up to the floor to people who can probably explain it a lot better than I can. But it was brought up the cover zero, kind of formation. For our listeners, from an educational perspective, can one of you cover zero from a defensive philosophy or play call?
Yeah, I can cover it. So a lot of what they're talking about is if you go on Brett Coleman's YouTube, he has a video talking about how the Dolphins ran the same blitz 34 times. So the blitz is essentially, it's cover zero. So cover zero means you have no deep safety playing zone on the back end. no safety blanket. It's man coverage across the board. So the coverage either sends 7 or 8 guys, depending on how many guys you have in the formation that are going to run routes. So you have everybody up at the line of scrimmage, and what they do is the defensive line will determine which way you slide protection. So is the center basically going to slide to the left or slide to the right? If he slides left, the guys on the opposite side, 2 of those defenders on the line will drop into coverage and play a short zone. What do you call a hook zone? So basically anything like slants, hitches, they're going to be there to help defend and really break up those passing lanes. And the other side, you're going to have like 5 guys come and try, and you're going to need like 3 guys to try and block them. In theory, there's always going to be at least 1 guy coming free, and it's going to force the quarterback to make a super quick lateral decision. Hey, I need to get this ball out quick and fast. There are beaters for it, just like there are beaters for every coverage. The Jamison Williams touchdown against the Vikings earlier this year was from a ping concept, a post on the backside and a dig on the front side. That in gets that safety and conflict, and that's how Jamison Williams got open so easily. Cover 0 is a blanket term, but if you play Madden, think of engage 8. That's the most generalized concept of cover 0.
I think everybody knows engage 8.
Yeah, but usually with these blitzes, you're only bringing 6 guys, so it's not like you're bringing the absolute house.
For sure.
Josh Boyer against the Bills brought the house, and he was bringing like 7, 8 guys consistently, and that's one of the reasons why the Bills were able to torch that Dolphins defense.
Well, and Matt, real quick, when you're thinking about all the different coverages, cover 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, they all tell you what the indicators are. Cover 0 is there are no high safeties. There's no one deep. There's no one deep covering. Cover 1, there's 1 high safety or someone covering deep. Cover 2, 2 people are covering deep. That can interchange on who those players are. Cover 3, same thing. Cover 4, 4 players deep. So it just varies from – it's a very simple way to think about it, but that's the best way from like a high-level standpoint to think about it. And then you interchange some of the different complexes and calls and things that go into the different varieties of defensive calls and things. But cover 0, no high coverage. Cover 1, 1, 2, the numbers just go up from there.
And if you think about how effective this defense can be on the mindset of the offense, right? So he alluded to this in the presser as well as, I'm going to give them that look. I want to give them that look often, right? That doesn't mean that he's going to run it every play. So now you're in the quarterback's head of, okay, do I have 6 people coming at me from an overloaded side or from multiple sides? Do I have to get the ball out quickly? Well, they may think that they have to do that. And of course, now we're playing coverage, and now that puts that quarterback in a bind quick, and hopefully our base rushers can get to him. So it's going to create a lot of confusion. He had mentioned kind of the cat and mouse, right? When's going to be the right time to bring him? When's going to be the right time to play coverage? So again, and Flores is shown to be pretty efficient at that.
That kind of matches Kevin O'Connell too, by the way, when he wants to put a formation out there and run different variations off of it. So I know they both said that they kind of do the same thing offensively and defensively, but just a point to add out there.
I want to follow up with what Ryan said when he talks about, hey, I'm going to give them the look a lot and not going to use it. Flores is probably going to use the cover 0 look, just like Mike Zimmer used the 2 linebackers in the 8 gaps. Yeah. And they're going to run a lot of different things off of it, because one of the easiest ways to make a quarterback confused is to give them new looks and then run different plays off it that you haven't seen on film. And that chess match is probably going to be what makes Brian Flores really fun as a defensive coordinator this season.
Yeah, Brian Asamoah should be really fantastic in this game. I know Ryan's going to be excited, but he really should be great.
I've been excited.
It's because of how athletic and multiple he is, though. And that's such an important piece that this defense needs. And so when Tyler was talking about, maybe Brian Branch being a possibility, I really think whatever they do with Harrison Smith is going to obviously be a key indicator on that, because with Lewisine coming back, and then obviously Cam Bynum can play. I don't think he's like some guy that you can't replace, but he's a good football player. He's a smart football player, and I think he probably fits a little bit more of this defense than he did the Ed Donatel defense. So maybe you shift him down and he's playing nickel a little bit more often, and those things in the 3 safety sets, and you interchange those guys. And I think that's a little bit more of what we might see. But I really think this defense under Brian Flores and how aggressive they're going to be, I really want. I've talked about this, but I really want that Terrence Newman, that Mike Hilton from the Bengals, that guy that can play nickel, but he can rush up the end off the edge. He could kind of be a quarterback in the cornerback room, excuse me, like a guy that can be multiple inside, outside, but he's your, a really good cover player. Might not be the biggest guy in the world. Captain Munnerlyn was really good at this at one point too in Minnesota. Like, I really want that like core nickel to come in and be really effective in this defense, because it's such an important like interchangeable player and a player that's like a Joker hybrid type player that can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. I think we'll have a lot of further conversations about kind of how this defense is constructed over the coming weeks.
It gets me excited. Gets me really excited.
I can tell, Miles.
Hearing them talk. Yeah.
I don't think I've seen Miles this pumped up for like anything.
And I'm not even a defensive person. Like I'm not. Like I was offense all day, and I'm always offense. But it's exciting.
That's all right.
The only time I've ever seen Miles this excited is when looking at me smiling about Michael Wilson. That's it.
Any final takeaways from you three before we wrap this thing?
I think I'll start and then I'll let you guys go. I'm excited to see what someone had asked the question about other assistants coming on. We obviously don't know that answer yet, but I am curious to see if there are any assistants that Brian Flores is going to bring in over the next few weeks, months, whatever that looks like, that he's familiar with because they know his scheme. Because right now, kind of like a Gary Kubiak coming in, Brian Flores, if they weren't to change any coaching assistants on defense, he'd be coming in having to teach his defense to everybody. And that's a lot. That's a hard thing to do. And so I think getting a couple of his assistants, and even if they're like assistant linebackers coaches, assistant DBs coach, like, those types of positions, just getting familiarity into the building is going to help teach that defense a lot quicker.
100%.
Yeah,
Tyler,
I'm really excited about personnel. I want to see which former Patriots and Dolphins that he brings in.
Or Steelers.
I'm 1 year, but yeah. I'm very intrigued to see what guys he wants to bring in to really help install this thing, what kind of versatility, and what this means for a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson. I don't know if he fits in what Brian Flores really wants to do as far as how versatile those defensive linemen are. Dalvin Tomlinson can play a lot of things. He's really only good at one thing, and that's playing like that 4-5 technique where he can really just bull rush after the passer. You move him too far inside and on a consistent basis, he's just not quite that guy that you at least like him to be. And I think, Matt, you and I have talked about it. I think Eric Rowe is probably going to end up a Minnesota Viking. I don't really see anything else. Nick Needham is another guy. And I think Josh Boyer, the former Dolphins defensive coordinator, is going to end up a member of the staff.
Keep an eye out for the linebacker Van Ginkel too. I think that's an underrated signing that they could do. I don't think it's going to make any splashes by any means necessary, but another guy that's got a lot of familiarity in a room that needs some depth behind Asamoah and potentially Kendricks and Hicks. So
yeah. The last comment I was going to make is just it was good to kind of see the relationship or the collaboration between O'Connell and Flores.
Collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, sure, buzzword, right? But they seem to, like I wrote in my notes here, they seem to really vibe well together, right? And you want that out of essentially your offense and your defense, right? It's a reflection of what hopefully the team's going to look like. Is a good complementary aspect to each other. So excited to see how that flourishes. Hopefully,
absolutely. Well, that's the Brian Flores press conference review here from Vikings Happy Hour. If you are not yet, please go like and subscribe, Climb in the Pocket, support all these wonderful faces on the show. Tyler will be back on Monday night for the Real Forno show. I'm sure breaking more of this stuff down. But until then, Skol Vikings.